Welcome to Unsealing You, the podcast that empowers ambitious women to take radical responsibility and break through barriers. I'm Dr. Natalie Luke, your host. Before we dive in, take a moment to download this episode so you can listen anytime, anywhere. If you love what you hear, please share it with your friends or social media network. Your support helps us grow. For those of you ready to take your ambition even further, consider joining our membership community. Imagine what you could achieve with the right tools and network. Our membership unlocks early episodes, practical workshops, and direct connections with inspiring leaders. Head to the show notes to join, download, or share. Now, let's get started with unsealing your potential and watch the ripple effect unfold. Hi, I'm Dr. Natalie Luke, and today I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Mona Jhaveri, a true innovator in the fight against cancer. Mona is the founder of Music Beats Cancer, a nonprofit organization tackling one of the biggest challenges in biotech, the Valley of Death, where many promising cancer treatments fail due to lack of funding. Mona's path to get here is remarkable. With a doctorate in biochemistry and research experience at the National Cancer Institute, she first founded Foligo Therapeutics, developing a groundbreaking therapy for ovarian cancer. When Foligo faced funding hurdles, Mona didn't give up. She transformed that setback into a mission to help other biotech innovators succeed. Her journey is a powerful message of how one woman's ambition and imagination can change the landscape of cancer research through resilience and a mindset of continuous learning. Mona has redefined how we fund life-saving solutions. Listen all the way to the end of the podcast to gain mindset mastery and hear how you can join her mission to make a difference.
Mona, your journey began with funding and founding Foligo Therapeutics back in 2005. Can you take us back to the start of Foligo? What inspired you to create a biotechnology company, and what challenges did you face in getting it off the ground?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Natalie. It's really an honor. So I guess your first question is what inspired me to do this anyway? And I guess in the laboratory as scientists, we discover new ideas every day. There's always a new thing, and it's exciting. And at the time, for me and for many researchers, it was what's really, I guess, motivating is this idea that you can create something, develop something, and it has the potential to help people that are really in need. And I guess that's what drove me in a way, is that there was an excitement around applying what you discover. And of course, at the time I was pretty naive and I didn't really understand the path and the expense and the time intensiveness and just all the things it would take to take a discovery from the bench and to develop it into a real medicine for somebody to benefit from. But and that's the thing about when you start up, naivete is a great thing because you jump without realizing all the pain points that you're going to encounter and the challenges, and you're just so focused on the gold at the end of the rainbow that these other things seem not worth worrying about. And so I would say there was a mixture, right, of that excitement and blindedness that finally got me to think to start up and become an entrepreneur. I had to transition from being an academic scientist to a startup entrepreneur, and that we have a name for this. I call it scientist CEO, where we really, as scientists, we should not be CEOs, but as a CEO, you're wearing all the hats. You're doing the science, you're writing the business plans, you're writing grants, you're paying the bills, you're from A to Z, and so that's the job I took on.
Mm-hmm. That is exciting, and at the same time, it's scary because you don't know everything that has to happen. How did you make that transition from being a bench scientist to the founder of the organization?
Yeah. So, well, first thing, another motivating piece for me to back up a little bit was when we made the discovery in the lab as a scientist, eventually that lab dissolved and no
Mm,
longer existed. But the discovery was still a discovery, and in fact
yeah,
was something that was new and could be patented. I asked the National Cancer Institute where I was working, since the lab was no longer working on it, and since I wanted to spin out a company, I asked them for my intellectual property rights to this invention.
okay,
And usually in the United States, if you discover something, but you work for an organization or a company, a big, institution, you don't own that discovery. The institution owns it. But in this
right.
case, I asked for those rights back. And eventually, after 6 months, they decided to give it back to me. And once I got the rights to my own intellectual property and my own discovery, I was then able to file my own patent, which is what I did. And so that got me sort of the first step. But then I realized, well, I didn't know how to write a business plan. I didn't know how to form a corporate structure. I didn't know how to bring a board on. All of the sort of meat and potatoes of starting a business, I did not know. And so I joined, just maybe it's coincidentally, in Maryland. I found a group that was launching a program specifically for women technology entrepreneurs.
Mm,
And that's how I got my start, at least in terms of thinking in a direction and understanding some of the key components, the financials, and all this, the sort of the key components to any business. But in this particular case, this was focused on women who are starting technology related startups. And this
right.
was born out of University of Maryland in Baltimore County. So it was a very lucky, right place, right time for me. And I had actually moved away from the Washington, D.C. area and then moved back. And I joined this course. And as I was doing the course, I was starting my business. So it was one of those, getting on the ramp to take off.
Yeah, that's so exciting. And it's also so great that you had that vision to get it started. You asked all the questions and you found organizations to help you. Now, Fuligo made it through the early funding rounds, but eventually encountered the dreaded valley of death. And you said earlier to me before we got started that many companies go to this, encounter the valley of death. How did you maybe talk a little bit about how a lot of different companies do this, and this is not a good thing for society? And also tell us, how did you cope with the setback? And what was the tipping point that led you to shift your focus from Foligo to founding Music Beats Cancer?
Yeah, and like you said, the Valley of Death, just to explain that a little more, it's not a real place. It's a metaphorical place, right? Where great ideas go to die. It's the dearth of funding. And metaphorically, it's like these great ideas dry up on a vine because they simply don't have the requisite cash to keep growing. And that is the sort of the fate of so many great ideas that fall in the hands of entrepreneurs, particularly biotech entrepreneurs. And the reason is because what it takes to advance bio a technology in the biomedical science is lots of cash, lots of time, lots of intense work that, realistically speaking, unless you have the already existing networks to funders, or unless you're already coming from a cash positive flush space where where you have the wherewithal to write grants and wait 6 months or 1 year or 2 years, if you have that time and financial wherewithal to do that, great. But for most scientist CEOs, we don't have that. It's just, it doesn't exist. Um, and it's for many reasons. Many scientists don't have, like myself. I mean, I was a lab rat basically. I didn't have the networks. I didn't have investors. I didn't have high net worth individuals that would back me in any way. All these years of getting of being in sciences and getting my doctorate and my postdoctoral work, we're not hanging out with the 1 or 2 percenters of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So those relationships just don't exist. And that too, a lot of investors are on the East Coast, West Coast, lots of women and minorities as well, traditionally don't have the reach to these types of networks. So there's many reasons why people with great ideas simply just don't have access to funds, because the access requires relationships. And for most scientists, CEOs, those relationships just don't exist. So I think this problem is not just a problem of money; it's a problem of relationship, the lack of relationships as well.
Got you.
That's really, the valley of death is this really all-encompassing problem. And the reality of it is, if great ideas for treating cancer, discovering cancer, monitoring cancer, if they don't come to fruition, it's not only failure of the entrepreneur and of the industry, it's an impact, a negative impact on society. Because on the one hand, thousands of great ideas aren't being fueled financially. And on the other hand, there's thousands of people they just don't have solutions for their cancers, not just in the United States, but worldwide.
Right. So how did this experience shape and fuel you for your next step?
Yeah, well, it was interesting because, we were talking about resilience. And I guess when I started the company, I really took it upon myself to look under every stone, to write every grant, participate in every business plan competition, to anytime somebody suggested, well, maybe you can ask this person or that person or find funding here or apply there. And I did it. I just went through all of the, approaches and venues where someone like myself could learn and access funds. And there were funds for sure that I was able to raise, but it's not enough. Not enough when you are developing a treatment for ovarian cancer, because what it takes simply to get it to the FDA is millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Simply to get it into a clinical trial, is a $2 million endeavor. And that is no easy lift.
Right.
It's so inevitably, the stakes were very high to find the actual kind of monies that we needed. And on top of it, I was on this learning curve. So clearly there were going to be a lot of, setbacks and lessons learned and wrong directions that I would have taken, did take, and would have taken, that would have been costly for sure. So that was really tough to weather. But what it did do is it taught me all the ins and outs of, taking science from the bench and attempting to commercialize it so that a person, could benefit. So that journey was just powerful and led me and put me in a really interesting position to launch something else, which is Music Beats Cancer, which is a charitable organization to help companies like Folligo Therapeutics. And one of the things I thought and I felt very strongly about was the kind of money early stage biotechs needed was what I call passion capital, non-dilutive funds that were not investment, but funds that were the kind of money that could help, cover or pay for that next critical experiment, so that these companies could actually reach what we call an inflection point where they become more attractive. And that kind of money to do that is not investor money or grant money, because grant money takes time and it takes peer reviewers. And if your peers don't like what you're doing, then you don't get the money. And if you have to go through a whole 6-month, 1-year process, then you're going to fail just because you're going to run out of time and cash. So we needed a way to raise, charitable funds, philanthropy, basically. And I really believe there's a role for philanthropy in early stage biotech startups.
Excellent. So can you tell me a little bit more about how Music Beats Cancer works? Like, how exactly do you gather those funds that you're going to transfer to the innovators, and how do you find your innovators, and how do you match up the philanthropy with the innovators?
Yeah. So, at the beginning, it was like all pulling teeth to find those innovators and get them to work with me. But just to back up a little bit, Music Beats Cancer is a charitable crowdfunding platform exclusively for early stage biotechs that are working on cancer fighting solutions. And so our platform allows people to use their tax deductible dollar to support a cancer fighting solution that they find compelling. So
Okay.
we are a little bit like a GoFundMe type of thing, or a
Okay.
Kickstarter, right? Where people can back a great idea
Great.
versus a like American Cancer Society, where you donate because you did a run for Walk for Life, or you just, and then those monies go to some committee that then makes a decision.
Mm.
And then that money then goes to a lab, a research lab, right? So we're funding entrepreneurs with solutions in hand. And like I like to say, entrepreneurs for cures rather than research for a cure. We're funding the actual solutions in hand, and we're allowing the donor to decide what sounds compelling and worthy and as per the donor's interest. And so that's what our model is. And then conversely, the companies set up a campaign on our platform, a cancer fighting campaign, and they receive these funds as grants
I
to
gotcha.
carry out whatever the next steps that they need. So this is sort of the interesting dynamic that we're a real out model, a peer-to-peer model, and all of this. I started Music Beats Cancer. We launched it formally in 2014, and it was the time of Uber and Airbnb. It was a time when equity crowdfunding
Mm.
launched, and the idea that we could be a crowd model and a peer-to-peer model in the biosciences was novel and still is, because there's not, at least that I know of, many groups like Music Beats Cancer that are connecting people who want to see change in the war on cancer with people who are working on solutions.
So as you founded it in 2014, which is
Yeah.
now 10 years.
Yeah.
Is there a favorite campaign that you can point to, or success that you can point to that you're really proud of?
Quick break, everyone. If you're enjoying this episode, remember to download it for offline listening and share it with your friends or network. Sharing helps us reach more ambitious listeners like you. Want to take your growth to the next level? Join our membership program for just a few dollars a month and gain exclusive benefits designed to support you. Early access to episodes, bonus content, and even a say in future topics. Don't just listen, be part of the journey. If you're a woman aiming for management, but stuck in the experience trap, listen up. You're talented, ambitious, but hitting a wall. You need experience to get a management role. But how do you get that experience? Introducing Unsealing Your Career, the book that's breaking the experience trap. Discover how to showcase your leadership potential, even without prior management experience. Transform your project skills into leadership assets and build a strategic career path. Ready to climb the ladder? Grab the book, Unsealing Your Career, today, at any place you prefer to purchase books, and start your journey to the top.
Yeah, there's several campaigns on our platform that have raised not huge dollars, maybe we'd say smallish dollars between 25,000 and 100,000, that then got to use these dollars for critical next steps.
Okay.
And I would say all of these campaigns, whether they raise money or not, are just doing cool things. And I think that to me makes this a lot of fun because they're cool things that I just would never have come across, right? And they're out of the box, which is why they're not being funded.
Right.
So I would say, and not all of them are about becoming financially lucrative startups, because some of them, that's their offering isn't going to make them, the millions of dollars that, that we all hope. For some of them, their offering is going to save tens of thousands of lives. And
I
I
see.
think that made me very proud to be able to bring on ideas that were lucrative in life-saving terms and not necessarily in financial terms. And the reason I say this is because I think what the public wants to see in terms of fighting cancer may be very different than what pharma wants to see.
Right. I see.
And here we're offering this opportunity for the public to get behind ideas that they think are going to move the needle, not necessarily what pharma thinks is going to move the needle.
Gotcha. What kind of habits, and I love the fact that you're so before the question, I love the fact that you're so societal driven, that you really are here to help society overall. Now, what kind of habits and mindsets have helped you stay resilient over the years through the ups and downs?
Well, when you say society, I think it's really important to think about, and we talked about this as we started, philanthropy, right? Philanthropy is a donated dollar. And what I have learned is that when people contribute a donated dollar, it's really personal. It's something that they experienced, something that they really care about. And I think, and maybe this is, becomes important habit for me, is to really understand where donors are at and what they care about, and to learn to listen and to observe, trends and so forth, because I think how people cast their dollars speaks volumes about how they want to solve a problem in society. And I think that's really important. And both big and small, right? Every $1 in the collective is really important. And also talking to high net worth people that
Right.
have bigger dollars to contribute. Everybody has their specific interests in terms of what they want to see advance. And it's not always about cancer. Sometimes people are interested in supporting women and minority owned companies.
Mhm.
Sometimes people are interested in supporting ideas that are going to benefit the underserved communities in Africa, say, that don't have access. And sometimes people just want to support cancer that they were impacted by and is deadly. Triple negative
Right.
breast cancer or pancreatic cancer. I think, and there's a lot of also pediatric cancers.
Mm.
I think it's really important to find the answers in the people through watching, listening, and just being observant and alert.
That's so great. So I have 3 more questions for you. One is, you've taken such a powerful mission with Music Beats Cancer. And I'm wondering about your latest ambitions and how the listeners can support you in your ambitions. Are there specific ways that they can get their voice heard through donation or spreading the word or awareness? What would make the biggest impact for you?
Well, I'd love for listeners to go to our website, musicbeatscancer.org, and there in the menu bar, there's a link to our campaigns, our active campaigns. And I'd love for listeners to hit that campaign link and just check out these great ideas.
Mm.
What I also think is important, traditionally, when people donate to fight the war on cancer, many of the stories about fighting cancer are the patients themselves, right? And that definitely pulls a lot of emotional, heartstrings. But there's another fighter in this battle, and that's the entrepreneur. And for Music Beats Cancer, the entrepreneurs are in the trenches, right at at the forefront of this battle, coming up with ideas to help mitigate, change the direction, improve the outcomes, etc. And I'd like to think that Music Beats Cancer in our mission, we're not, while there are many organizations supporting the patients, that's not where we are focused. I like to think about, this whole issue as if there were a flood and people were drowning in the flood, you'd see people rescuing those drowning with lifeboats and so forth. And that's how I think of charity. It's usually rescuing the drowning, or sometimes we have communities that are like hospitals that are sort of putting everybody on rafts. Rarely would you find this person that would swim, upstream to figure out how do we just stop the flood to begin with,
Yeah.
right? That person is trying to tackle a systemic approach, right, to the issue. And that's how I see Music Beats Cancer. We're going after a systemic breakdown in the war on cancer. And I think there's not many charities that really are thinking this way when it comes to public issues. So I'd love the listeners to jump on board and rethink how we are shifting the paradigm in fighting the war on cancer. And we want more people to get on board with just addressing this valley of death issue. And yes, going through our campaigns and learning and discovering what they find is interesting or compelling for them. That is what would make me most happy and would be helpful to our cause.
Yes, we will help you with that cause. 2 remaining questions. Looking back on your journey, what would you say has been the most important lesson that you've learned about failure, resilience, and ultimately success? And if you were to go back today and talk to your younger self and give that younger self some advice, what would it be?
Yeah, well, I guess there's a lot in that. But I guess, when at one point, Natalie, we spoke about ambition, and I was thinking about that a lot. And I often think when we talk about ambition, we talk about the excitement of it, just the strength and the resilience. But I also think that there's a large component of fear in ambition, the fear of looking back, the fear of failing, the fear of what would you do if it didn't work out. Right now, all of, fear is hugely motivating. I think in order to be successful, those fears are necessary, but they're necessary in that they fuel you in the right direction. They get you up in the morning, and you don't want to see, the wrong outcome. I put a lot of emphasis on that because I think when you're alone at night and you're falling asleep, most of us face and have to confront ourselves and our own fears. And there's actually nothing wrong with that. There's real power in that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I say this because I'd like people to understand that being afraid is so normal, that the most impactful thing you can do is just observe your own fear and act accordingly as you experience them, and not act in a way that, I guess, where you get triggered to do something negative, but get triggered to do the positive, right? But be respectful of the fact that these fears are real, they're motivating you. And I guess your question is, what would I tell my younger self? And that would be, honestly, change nothing at all, because I like to applaud my wrong paths and the fact that I do have fears, and the fact that I'm just a normal person. Like, I like to applaud all the hard stuff, because there really is no success without all the difficulty. And people always say you learn nothing from your successes and everything from your failures, right? And there really is truth to it. And here I sit today, and often think about this happened, and I really wish I didn't fall into that trap, and I wish I didn't listen to that person, or these folks took me the wrong path, and now I have this loss and that loss. But I like to think about failure in measured ways. They're short-term failures. They're not determinants of the end goal, right?
They don't
And
define you.
yeah. And when I was growing up, I was a runner. I was a competitive runner.
Mm.
And I remember in the Times there was this poster that we all wanted on our wall. 'Cause back then we would put posters on our wall. And
Mhm.
there was this one poster that we all wanted as runners, and it said, "The race isn't for the swift, it's to those who keep going."
Mm.
Right? And when I went on to to do my doctorate, above my desk, I put that same poster. And,
Yeah.
and I still have that poster, because the end game is when you say it ends, right? It's
Yeah.
not when you experience the setbacks. And so those I like to call the micro losses, but the macro goal is to build Music Beats Cancer so that it becomes the go-to charity for fighting cancer, and so that we rethink how we fight cancer, and we actually have a public that gets excited about science as I do. And you don't have to be a scientist to find science and innovation fascinating. And that's what I want to achieve with Music Beats Cancer.
That is so excellent. The last question is a bonus question. You've gone from being a scientist to an entrepreneur to now a nonprofit leader. That's 3 major transitions. How has that transition shaped your leadership style, particularly when it comes to mentoring and maybe even talking to other science leaders?
Yeah, so that's really interesting, because I would say I don't know that any of that changed my leadership style. I mean, at the beginning, you don't even know you're a leader, right? You're just sitting in a lab and you're not leading anybody because you're not seeing anybody. You're just simply working in a siloed space. But if there is anything, and I didn't share this, that has changed my leadership style, it's being a mother.
Mm.
And I will say one of the biggest challenges, because through all of this, I was giving birth, I was breastfeeding babies, I was running around toddlers, and today I'm navigating teenagers. And when I first, when I first was pregnant, and had my kids, I used to be extremely frustrated, because I felt like I couldn't do it all. I couldn't
Mm.
be a mother. My time was confounded. My energy was limited. It was hard to find, you're just juggling and struggling.
Mm.
And I still am as a mother of teenagers. One of the things that really shaped me was I learned that some of the most important sort of characteristics I needed to be a leader was found in being a mother.
That is so great.
Patience, right? The patience, the love for the baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
The ability to look at the end game and not focus on all the little minor breakdowns in the moment. To stand for something. Also, you're constantly team building and looking for collaborations and working on collaborations and guiding people. And all this time, you're sort of standing for the big picture,
Mm.
right? And I just like to believe, and I wish we could believe, that motherhood is the most important leadership role a woman can have, and maybe you could say a father too. But I guess traditionally it's been the women that are holding the house and making sure everything runs. And even in society, something happens at school, they don't call dad, they call
Yeah.
mom. And there's this constant, you just emerge as the natural leader in your relationship, in your family, in your communities. And it's no different in when you're running an organization and leading a paradigm shift, for a very important issue in society. Leadership is no different. It's the same in all, I guess, facets. And so I like to think about when you're a leader in your home, you're a leader in life.
Yes, makes sense.
I say this in part because there's so many women that feel being a mom is a setback. And I have experienced it the other way. Being a mom is the most powerful thing that you can have under your belt. I feel, and it should be in our LinkedIn profiles because it speaks to your ability to be tenacious and at the same time be loving, right?
Yes.
For the people around you. It's a real skill.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that insight and your mindset towards that. I also thank you for coming on and talking about Music Beats Cancer. I hope that we can get a bunch of listeners going to the site and looking at all the different opportunities to help the researchers move things forward. So thank you so much.
This has been so great chatting with you and sharing this. I'm so grateful when people highlight our mission and love that you kind of pick apart a journey, right? Because one person's journey is often shared with a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I like also, there's this idea in my mind, like when you're young, you think there's some right path, but the reality of it is there's no right.
Yeah.
There's no right. There's just a journey that happened to work for you because you just kept going.
Yes. I love that. Thank you so much.
And thank you.
What's holding women back from leadership? The answer might be in the broken rung. For every 100 men promoted to manager, only 72 women are promoted. The broken rung, an invisible barrier keeping talented women from advancing to that first managerial role, widening the gender gap at the top. It's a harsh reality, driven by bias in promotion processes. But there's a way forward. Introducing Unsealing Your Career, a powerful new book that's a blueprint for breaking through. This isn't just another career guide. It shows you how to leverage your strengths, choose strategic projects, and build the skills you need to reach new heights. In Unsealing Your Career, you'll discover practical tools to conquer self-doubt, design a clear path forward, and network with people who uplift you. Ready to reach your unique destiny and redefine success? Unsealing Your Career. Available now wherever you like to purchase books. Don't wait for permission to rise. Grab your copy today and start breaking through.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Unsealing You. If today's conversation inspired you, make sure to download this episode so you can revisit it anytime and subscribe to the show so you never miss a new episode. For those of you ready to take your ambition to the next level, I invite you to consider joining our membership community where you'll get exclusive bonus content, early access to episodes, and much more. Until next time, remember, it's time to take radical responsibility for your life and unseal your potential to watch the positive ripple effect unfold.